So I am going to record, so don't say anything, you know, on camera or whatever that you don't want general public to hear. My recommendation is you have your microphones muted, okay? Last week, if you were here, I know some of you weren't, but if you were here last week, we did my spine flow for the spine. If you want to check that out, I recorded it last week. It is up on my Patreon page, my YouTube page. You can check that out. But this week, we are going to work on hips. Now, because of copyright issues, it's not possible for me to legally play music in the background. So if your microphone's muted, you want to put on some of your favorite, I recommend ambient music, so not anything with a strong rhythm, but you know, something you like, something relaxing to go with the class, go ahead and do that. If you have a comment or a question during the practice, try using the comment box, okay? And if that doesn't work, then you can unmute and go ahead and leave me, you know, say something into your microphone to get my attention if I don't, you know, if I don't respond to your comment, okay, or chat. All right, so let's go ahead and start with just the chanting Om together. We will probably not chant at the end of class, so it might be nice to just at least start with a tiny bit of chanting. Those of you who take my class in person know that chanting is a big part of my teaching. I need to remember where the camera is, so it's over here. All right, so if you'd like to join in, we're going to chant this together 3 times. Take a nice deep breath. Namaste. All right, so let's get into our hip flow. We will start with a half butterfly. So the right leg is straight, the left foot comes to the inside of the thigh. Then we come forward and down in a relaxed manner. What we want to feel is a stretch in the back of the right thigh. Okay, so if you don't feel that, I want you to let me know. All right, so I'm getting out my props because I want to talk about the use of the props in this posture. Okay. Now, the first 2 things when you're doing a yoga pose with me, especially a yin posture, is you first need to verify that you, to the best of your knowledge, you are safe doing this. Okay. It's not to say that you can't misjudge or get that wrong from time to time. You might. But to the best of your knowledge, as far as you know, this is safe for you. You feel that this is safe, okay? That's number 1. Number 2 is you feel the stretch in the back of your right thigh, okay? So if you're not feeling that stretch, I need you to leave me a comment, okay? I need you to let me know somehow so that I can maybe take a look at your posture, or you can describe it to me and we can adjust it. But for most people, it's not a problem. Okay, so feeling safe, feeling a stretch in the back of the thigh. Foot can be flexed or relaxed. I recommend relaxing it unless flexing it for some reason is going to bring you a lot of extra stretch. It might, but unlikely. All right, let's look at the props. First thing I'll mention is block under the forehead. Okay, supporting you a little bit, only if necessary. So if you feel this is a little too intense, then maybe putting a block here help reduce the intensity. Can put blocks under your forearms, same idea. A little too intense, use the blocks to support. Can also use a block under this knee, left knee. If the knee is in the air or I feel strain here, then I might want to support it. I can also use the block to sit on, and this will tilt me forward a little more aggressively. And for some people, that's what they need. They need a little bit of a deeper stretch. Okay. The blanket, very similar to the block in many respects. I can sit on it. I can put it under the knee. Okay. Just a little softer, a little lower. And you may or may not have these props at home. So it doesn't have to be this kind of a blanket. It doesn't need to be a block. It could be a book, something like that. But with the pandemic going on and all of us doing a lot of yoga at home, now might be the perfect time, perfect excuse for getting on Amazon and ordering some yoga props. Bolster, a little more restricted, just maybe like this, laying the torso on it. Again, I can combine props. So this here, if my forehead's in the air and I want to rest my torso on the bolster. But I always try and give a word of caution after talking about props, because a very common mistake that I have found that people make, and not just students either, unfortunately, but yoga teachers, is that yin yoga and restorative yoga get confused. Okay, so some of you may have heard me say this in the past, but I really want to emphasize that it's not restorative yoga. So we are trying to feel a stretch in the back of our thigh. If you don't feel that because you're all propped up, you've got your bolster, you've got your blocks, and you're just super comfy, but you don't feel the stretch in the back of your thigh, well, you're not doing yin anymore. Now you're doing restorative yoga. Now, there's nothing wrong with restorative yoga, but restorative and yin do have different approaches. And again, this is where when teachers lack education, they may not recognize that. They may not realize that. They assume, that it's just about the posture. But the intention behind restorative practice and the intention behind yin are pretty different. I don't really consider restorative practice exercise, whereas yin is a type of exercise. Again, is exercise yoga? No, but yoga can be, or exercise can be yoga. Okay, yoga is not exercise, but exercise can be yoga. All right, let's go ahead and come on up. We're going to switch sides. If you're wondering how long that was about 5 minutes. Okay, so we're doing 5 minutes, 5-minute holds today. We're going to switch sides, left leg. Same thing. I need to check in, make sure that I feel safe. I can flex or point this foot. I can support this knee. I can, again, use my props, right? Otherwise, we're going to be here for about 5 minutes. Just go ahead and relax into it. Another thing I want to mention here, because I can't see you, is if you're doing this, I don't recommend it, okay? The reason is it's very easy to misjudge. It might feel good while you're doing it. And you think, ooh, this is like much deeper. I like this. It's more intense. Right? A lot of times we think more intensity is better. Well, that's a good way to injure yourself very slowly over a long period of time. So if you get in the habit of kind of yanking yourself down into these postures, again, it might feel really good while you're doing it. It might feel good for a long time. And then one day you have a sharp shooting pain in your back, and it seemed to come out of nowhere. Well, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of bad habits that you had picked up in doing this practice. So again, my recommendation, just relax into it. We're about a minute, 30 seconds into this. So we're going to be here for about 3 minutes and 30 seconds longer. Again, any comments, questions, leave them in the chat box for me. So we've got about a little over a minute left here. All right. So you might find that you might need to adjust something. Generally, if you don't need to adjust, then don't. Just stay where you are. But partway through yin posture, it's not uncommon that we might feel that we would benefit by rearranging or adjusting ourselves in some way. All right. Hopefully you all know what that means. It means we're going to take a rebound. So coming up and then back onto your back and relaxing in stillness for a few moments before we do a counter stretch. Okay, the counter stretch, we're going to bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, and this is called the leg cradle. It's just moving around a little bit. Finding ways of moving that feel like they bring the body back to balance and they bring some relief into the body. Okay. All right, and then we will hinge up. So the hinge is a stabilization move. It activates the core and the hip flexors, thus sort of stabilizing the hips and the spine. To do the hinge, I slide my hands under my hips, palms down, extend the legs straight up toward the ceiling. All right, I lift my head and neck up, take a nice deep breath, and then slowly lower the legs toward the ground. And just before they touch, I pause, inhale, pop the legs up, and exhale, let the weight of the legs pull me up to seated. Okay. All right, from there, let's move into a tabletop position. Tabletop position. Okay. And in tabletop, what I'd like to do is position my hips directly over my knees. And I'm going to turn to face the side of my mat. Now, from there, I take my right leg straight out to the right. And I take my left knee as far away from my right ankle as I can. You can stay up on your hands. You can rest down on your forearms. Okay, your feet can point or flex. So I can point my foot, I can flex my foot, I can point the toes up or forward or away from me. My hips can stay over the knees like so, or I can press them back toward my left heel. My left foot can flex or point, and I can have that foot out behind the knee, or I can pull it in closer to the midline of my body. Again, props. I could use a block under my forehead, support my head. The head's heavy, so holding it up here for 5 minutes might be okay for some people. It might also feel tiresome for others. And you have 3 heights for the block. Again, if you don't have a set of yoga props at home, you can use something else, but I do recommend, it's not a bad idea to invest. I don't think they're that expensive. I bought these a long time ago. They last a lifetime, so you shouldn't need to order more once you have a set. You can also put the block under this knee. So some people have sensitivity here. It's called the pes anserinus. It's an attachment for the adductors, which we are stretching right now. But because of that, that can create a pulling sensation that maybe doesn't feel safe. So putting a block underneath there can help. Blanket could also work potentially. If you are on a hard surface, okay, I've got carpet here, but I've practiced this on wood and concrete floors before. You might want to pad your forearms with a blanket. Perfectly fine as well. Okay, so those are the main ways to use the props. We want to feel stretch in here. This is the adductors, also known as your groin. Okay, and again, we want this to be well within the range of what we consider is safe for our body. So if there's something about this that doesn't quite feel right, again, you need to let me know so I can give you a hand with it. Otherwise, we're about 2 minutes, 30 seconds in. We're about halfway through. I do want to mention this prop, which is a bolster. This is one way to use it. And another way is to actually sort of cradle it. Okay, so again, if this were a restorative practice, then I probably wouldn't have this leg out at the side. I wouldn't try and be stretching it. So it's not that it's wrong to make yourself comfortable. So, I mean, if this feels good, then by all means, go ahead and do that. Just don't lose the stretch here. Because when we start to practice yin, like restorative yoga, we end up doing restorative yoga, not yin yoga. So it doesn't really work the other way around. I've never seen people practicing restorative or trying to practice restorative and accidentally doing yin. I've just never seen or heard of that. I suppose it could happen, but I would find that unlikely to happen because in restorative, there's so much focus on being comfortable and relaxed that it's unlikely you would allow yourself to feel a stretch this intense in this leg. You'd be like, oh, I need to adjust, make myself comfortable. But when we bring that mindset to yin, we sort of cut the legs out from underneath our yin practice. And yin has, again, a different set of benefits it's going to bring us. So my recommendation is nothing wrong with practicing restorative. Just go do a restorative class if that's what you want. Restorative is going to focus much more on deep relaxation and relaxing the nervous system. And it's just generally taught in a different way. You can teach restorative or you can teach yin closer to a restorative class, and many people do that. They focus more on relaxation. Most of you know that that's not my emphasis when teaching yin. There are other techniques, other styles that I would use if I wanted relaxation to be a focus. One of them being restorative. So if I really wanted to relax your nervous system, focus on that aspect, then I'd probably just teach you a restorative class, not a yin class. All right, let's go ahead and switch sides. All right, take your time making your way over to the other side. Again, so we're doing, I call this a kickstand. Kickstand on side 2. I'm not going to use this guy though. Okay, coming into our kickstand pose. And we want to feel nice stretch here. I might use a block under my forehead though. That might be a nice way to support myself here. A little over 2 minutes left here. So again, this is perhaps the time when you might check in see if anything needs adjusting. There are generally two directions you might go in. One is maybe you came into the pose pretty deep at first, and after a few minutes, now it feels a little too intense. So you want to back off a little bit. That is fine. I recommend backing off instead of coming out of the posture because, again, the benefits of yin postures come from the time. And we don't always hold for 5 minutes, but today that is our objective. So we want to try and do the full 5 minutes if that is possible. So backing out a little bit, perfectly fine. The other direction you might go in is actually going a little deeper. And it's not necessary to chase after it. I once heard a yin teacher who said, chase the stretch. You don't need to chase it. Okay, there isn't, once you've sort of stretched out, you need to make sure you feel it at the beginning, but then once that sensation goes away, you can just relax there. You don't have to go further. Further is not necessarily better. Okay, so this isn't a competition. This isn't the most flexible person wins or anything like that. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just got a little more than 30 seconds here. So I am actually going to come out of this pose early because I'm teaching. I'm not doing a class, but I want you all to stay there for the next 30 seconds or so. All right, so let's again rebound. So there are two postures I suggest for the rebound here. One is a child pose. The other would be laying on your belly in crocodile pose. One hand over the other, your forehead resting on the hands there. So choose the one that you think is more appropriate for you, and just relax there for the next 30 seconds to a minute. Again, we call this feeling the rebound. Feeling the rebound it can be a very important part of the practice. It really just sort of depends on your emphasis. It can be the most meditative part of yin practice, and it can be the most surrendered part of yin practice. So it can be very, very important. But there's no, like so many things, there's no one way to approach the rebound. So I got a email from a teacher once who said that she had been through training and they had insisted that you rebound after every single posture. Well, that word rebound comes from my teacher, Paul Grilly, and I trained with him personally, and he didn't say you have to do it after every pose. In fact, he said you can just do one at the end of class. That's what we call shavasana, right? So the longer I teach, and I've been teaching for over 2 decades now, and the more that I study, the more I realize there's no absolute right and wrong. Really, the question is, what is our intention, and is what we're doing achieving our intention? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then we should keep doing what we're doing. If the answer is no, then we need to look and we need to change. Okay? So if I'm putting a rebound in my class, what do I want from that rebound? What is that teaching the students? What is it doing for them? Speaking of which, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, and I want you to shake it out. Now, always remember that you want to rebound first, and then you can move and stretch. I sort of talked through that last rebound, but I'll often try and give you some time where you're just relaxing in silence so you can really feel those sensations. Again, for me, there's always, exceptions to every rule. So sometimes I'm going to talk right through it because what I'm saying I feel is important. Other times I'm just going to be quiet and let you sort of feel what's there. Okay, so coming up, oh, sorry, I said leg cradle, but probably bear pose is better. So if you're not in bear, come into bear. Bear is on all fours, so like this, and we're just going to move around. This is another type of counter stretch that we use, and I've been having some funkiness in my back lately. It's very interesting because I had hurt my back uh, about a year ago, and it took me a while to feel that I'd really recovered, and I felt like I'd really almost fully recovered. And then just recently, I sort of took a dip back, so there's more sensitivity in my back. Not sure why that is. All right, from here, we'll tuck our toes, come up and back into down dog, pedal out our feet a little bit, stretch things out. All right, then what I'd like you to do is bring the right knee toward the right wrist, the right foot to the left side of the mat. The hips are down and back, and then our torso comes forward and down. This is the sleeping swan. The target is here. Okay, the gluteals, the big muscles in the outside of the hip. Why are they so big? Because they're our strongest muscle. The glute max is our biggest and strongest muscle. Why is it so big and strong? Because it's our main locomotor. Think about it. What pulls that leg back when you walk or run? It's that big muscle back there. Okay? So we're trying to stretch that big muscle because when we use a muscle a lot, it's going to get tense. And so if we walk, if we run, if we bike, we hike, if we climb, we're probably using our glutes quite a bit, and that tension is going to show up there. All right, let's look at variations for this posture. Right foot close to my right hip. Right foot pulled closer to the front edge of the mat. Now you'll see that I'm being pushed over. So I wouldn't do this because if I tried to force my left hip down, instead of working my hip more deeply, I would likely just tear my knee up. Okay, so I'm going to pull my foot back to right about there. That foot could be flexed or pointed, right? Either works. And you can also change the angle of your knee. So the knee is pointing forward, but I can bring it out to the side like that. That's called the abduction angle. So I'm changing the abduction angle of my knee. Props. Again, I can use a block underneath my forehead, right? Again, the head's heavy. So if I have to hold it up the whole time, might not be ideal. So I rest my head here. I could put the block under this hip so that my hip's square. It is okay if your hip rolls over to one side, if you like the way that feels. If you still feel a stretch, you still feel safe, it's fine. Some people roll over to the other side. So this hip comes up, they sort of roll off onto their left hip. Again, perfectly fine. One size doesn't fit all. Find what works for you. We can use a blanket much in the same way we use the block. So underneath that hip, it's a little more comfortable. Okay? Again, if I'm on a concrete floor, my forearms are on the floor, I might take the blanket underneath my forearms. A lot of this is common sense, but you never know, depending on your upbringing and who you practice yoga with, where you practice, how much you practice. Some people feel very insecure about doing anything on their own, modifying anything. If the teacher doesn't mention something, then they feel very, very apprehensive about changing anything. So I try and just cover all the bases. That's pretty much it for this posture. There are a few other things I could mention, but they're sort of little more specific and generally not necessary for a general audience like we have today. So wouldn't worry about those things. Make sure you feel the stretch, make sure you feel safe, and we've got about a little more than a minute left in this one. All right, so you can transition through a down dog. You could do tabletop, making our way to the other side. You don't have to go quite that quickly if you don't want to. All right, so sinking back into that left hip this time. We want to feel it there. Again, you need to communicate to me somehow if you don't feel that, because that means the pose is not effective. It's not working the way that we would like it to work. And you know, some days it can be a challenge. For me, I'm having to sort of work it a little bit to get a decent stretch. I'm not sure why that is. Usually I have plenty of tension in this part of my body, and it's stretch those muscles out. But today, on this side specifically, it's a little more challenging. So this goes to another point that I often mention in class, which is that our bodies are fluid. They are not really solid. I know that we think of our bodies as solid objects, and in a sense they are. But we are mostly water, and according to quantum physics, we're actually mostly empty space, as is every physical object, including, say, this block. So what we perceive with our senses is not really the way things actually are. And this is something that yoga tries to teach us to actually experience. Because we can know that hypothetically or theoretically, and yet when we experience the truth of it, it can really, really be a powerful experience to change our perception, so that we're really seeing reality more how it is. But even if you have not had that experience, that change of perception, I'm here to tell you that basically your body is very fluid. It's more fluid than this block. And what that means is it's going to change from day to day, and even within one day. If you've ever had the pleasure of doing yoga in the morning and then doing yoga perhaps in the afternoon or the evening on the same day, or maybe you did the same class on a morning and then you do it again in the evening, maybe you have a video, you may have realized how different the experience can be. That in the morning, certain things feel good, like a good powerful stretch, and then by the afternoon you're warmed up, and it doesn't really work anymore, that stretch. By the same token, in the morning you maybe can't do a really difficult posture that requires your maximum flexibility, and then in the afternoon or evening, no problem. Okay, so as we go through our day, our joints get compressed, our muscles warm up and fill with blood. There are all kinds of explanations for this. So again, our bodies are much more fluid than they are solid. They're always changing. And what we want to do is just really pay attention, really not think of the body in a static way. What do I mean by that? Oh, I can do this. I can do that. I can do this pose. I can do that pose. That might be true most of the time, might be true all the time. But when we practice, we really ideally come to our mat with a little more of an innocent mindset, a little more curiosity than willfulness. So we're just sort of playing and we're seeing what the body can do. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have discipline. Discipline is absolutely vital in practicing yoga, but so is a sense of curiosity. And again, I can use the word playfulness, but I don't want you to ever interpret playfulness to mean a lack of discipline. Musicians call what they do for a living play. You play music for a living. You play. There's a reason you use that term, play, because that's what it feels like. However, musicians have to work really hard in order to be able to play. They have to have a lot of discipline. They practice hours and hours and hours, sometimes every day, so that they can play. So again, if we're not careful, we get off on one side. We think, oh, play, I don't have to work. I don't need any discipline. I'm just having fun. I just want yoga to be fun. Well, it really can't be as much fun if we don't have discipline. It's really the discipline that actually frees us to play. And I know that might not be obvious immediately, but that is my experience. All right, let's come out of our pigeon and let's go ahead and come back onto our back and we'll rebound there. All right, let's bring those legs in. And then we'll hinge up. Okay, so now we'd like to stretch the front of the thigh, and today we're going to use the full saddle to do this. So the first step in doing full saddle is to fold the foot back like so. Okay? Now, there are a few areas of contention, and I'm going to go over all of them. So please just bear with me. If you're in pain, then just do what you need to do to make sure that you're not hurting yourself. First thing I want to mention is the foot. The toes can point back, or they could come out like that. Not everyone can do both, so you don't want to try and force your foot into this position. Okay? The people that can do this can usually do this as well, but some people can only do this, and they can't do that. All right? Now, if your foot or ankle are complaining, pat it with a blanket. You can roll the blanket up and put it underneath your ankle. That's not actually how I would do it. I would do it more like this. Okay, so that the ankle does not need to straighten completely. So you're adding a little bit of support there. All right. You can also, if the knee hurts, try a few things. One is changing the angle that the knee is at. Anywhere in there, you have several different positions. The other is sitting on something like a block or a stack of blocks. Okay. Again, we don't want the ankle and the knee to feel unsafe in this position, in this posture. Now, once you feel the ankle and the knee are okay, you can begin lowering back. Now, you might come back just here. You might come here. Okay, you might come all the way onto your back. All right, if you don't feel the stretch in the front of your thigh, you might bend this knee. You can drop the knee out to the side. You can place that foot on the opposite thigh. You can even hug the leg in. Okay? Now, what about props? Well, I already mentioned a few of them, but one very common use of prop is to take a bolster behind us and then relax on that. Okay, if your head doesn't quite reach, you can put a blanket under your head. Additionally, if you find you don't go back very far, you can take a bolster and make what I like to call a yoga lazy boy out of it. Something like that. Prop it up. And again, I lay back. I can put a block or a blanket underneath my head so that I'm comfortable, relaxed, and safe. Again, I need to feel it here. Okay, so the fact that I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, I'm safe, that's important, but I need to feel a stretch here. So in other words, if I have a choice between being more comfortable or getting a better stretch, I'm going to pick getting a better stretch. Okay, and this is again one of the big differences between how we generally approach restorative practice versus yin practice. And it's important in general in yoga. Restorative and other practices like it are very much they're intended for one phase of yoga. So in yoga, we very often, in one phase, want to emphasize relaxation. It's important. So it's not a small thing. It's not something that is should be skipped or anything like that. But it's not the whole journey. And with modern life being so stressful as it is, many people come to yoga and seek out yoga because they do find it relaxing. And you could say they sort of get addicted to relaxing with yoga. And they never explore what yoga is really about, which is more than just relaxation. Okay, so I like to, point those things out, remind people of that, because otherwise we might get the wrong idea. And it's not wrong or bad to use yoga to relax. But if you're interested in yoga, and I would say if you have experienced some of the benefits of yoga, what I would encourage you to do is don't stop. There's much more there for you. Yoga is so rich and it is so transformational. And practicing it can give us the experience of just feeling that life gets more and more and more enjoyable as we go. Okay, so I would encourage anyone who's going to listen to dig a little deeper with your yoga. Don't stop on the surface. Don't stop at relaxation. Don't stop at ecstasy. Keep going and really experience the depth of what's possible. All right, so coming up, we'd like to switch sides, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this stuff because I don't usually use that stuff. And I'll do this side with you. Okay, so taking that left foot back again, you are more responsible than usual for putting yourself in a position that makes sense for you. And again, you can use the props as needed. We want to feel a stretch in the front of the thigh. You might feel your back a little bit in this posture. It's not uncommon, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But again, it needs to be within the range of what you feel is safe. About 2 minutes left. So making your way up out of that pose. And then you can rebound for a moment on your back. All right, so let's transition into doing Yoga Nidra. I'm bringing the camera closer for the microphone. You don't really need to see me for this part of it. So what I recommend is a bolster under your knees. You're laying back flat on your back. Arms and legs splay out comfortably at your sides. The head is centered, the chin is tucked in slightly, and the eyes are closed. Okay. And we will be doing approximately 15 minutes or so of relaxation, or Yoga Nidra, which is guided relaxation. And then I think we're early enough today that we might be able to chant out today. So we'll see how it goes. So make yourself very comfortable. And most of you have done this practice with me before. The two main instructions are you'd like your body to remain still, and you'd also would like to remain awake or alert. Okay. So the tendency as we get quiet and get still, relaxing on our back, is to doze off and fall asleep. So I want you to try and resist that urge. Okay. All right. So set the intention mentally to allow yourself to remain still. Set the intention mentally to remain awake. Let's begin by taking a nice full deep breath in, and we will exhale with a deep sigh, just letting all that air out. And again, let's take a nice full deep breath in, and we will exhale with a deep sigh, let it all out. Good. Now I'd like to invite you to work with a personal intention today. So personal intention in yoga is called a sankalpa. And for your sankalpa, you would like it to be made in the first person in the present tense and use only positive or affirmative language. So a good example of that might be, I am healthy. If I were sick and I was wanting to heal, then my sankalpa might be, I am healthy. Okay. I always recommend that people choose something that's important to them. Your sankalpa, if say you wanted money, might feel shallow, but sometimes it's when we get what we want that we actually start to become interested in spirituality. Because sometimes we get what we want and we find out, oh, this isn't really what I want. I thought I wanted $1 million, but now that I have it, I still feel like something is missing. So it's all part of the journey. It's all spiritual in the end. Everything is spiritual. Everything that you can think of, even the most horrific thing that you can think of. From the Zen Buddhist perspective, which is the perspective that I came up with, everything is sacred. There really isn't a difference between sacred and profane. So once you have your sankalpa, I want you to repeat it to yourself silently 3 times. And then put it out of your mind. Let's turn our attention now to the body. I'm going to begin to name specific points on your body. And as I name each one, I'd like you to simply shift or to move your focus or your attention to each point as it's named. Try and do this without moving your body. And you might experience the points in several different ways. You might experience them as a felt sensation, like as if someone were touching a point. You might experience it as inner sight. You might sort of see each part of your body, maybe even from the inside. You might see a light or a blue star, some kind of a energy. However you experience it is perfectly fine. Okay, do what comes naturally to you. So let's move our attention up to the point between the eyebrows. Now the pit of the throat. The right shoulder. The elbow. The right wrist. Your thumb. Index finger. Middle finger. The ring finger. Little finger. The wrist. Elbow. Shoulder. In the pit of the throat. Left shoulder. Elbow. Wrist. The left hand thumb. The tip of the index finger. Middle finger. Ring finger. Little finger. Wrist. Elbow. Shoulder. In the pit of the throat. Now the center of the chest. The right side of the chest. The center of the chest. The left side. The center of the chest. The navel. The middle of the pubic bone. The right hip. The knee. The ankle. Your big toe. Second toe. Middle toe. The fourth toe. And the little toe. The ankle. The knee. the hip, and the middle of the pubic bone. Now the left hip, the left knee, the ankle, big toe, the second toe, the middle toe, the fourth toe, the little toe, your ankle, your knee, the hip, and the middle of the pubic bone. Now the navel, the middle of your chest, the pit of your throat, and the point between the eyebrows. Allow yourself to move even deeper into this point between the eyebrows. Feel yourself dropping below the layer of thought into the deep, expansive part of the mind that contains all thought, but is not thought. Within this vast expanse of awareness, draw to mind your personal intention or sankalpa and repeat it to yourself 3 times silently. Now return awareness to your breathing. Slowly, gradually, begin to move and stretch as you wake yourself up, moving your fingers and your toes, ankles, wrists, arms, and legs. Okay, stretching and eventually making your way up to seated. So this is something we haven't done in a while, but again, finishing a little earlier. This is one of the perks of finishing a little earlier. We've been doing a lot of the live classes at 8. So 8 means we finish at 9. It's a little late, and I like to be a good neighbor if I can. So anyway, we'll finish with our mantra Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. If you'd like to join me, please do. I'll be singing call and response because obviously I can't hear you guys. So namaste, everyone. I hope you got a lot from that practice. In closing, I do want to mention my gratitude for being able to lead you through that practice, for the technology we have that allows us to do this. It's pretty miraculous. It isn't the same as being in person, but I find the live classes do feel a little different than doing just a video. Even though there's not much interaction between us, it still feels different knowing there are people on the other end practicing as we go through it. One thing I want to mention is I remember days coming in to teach. I really love my job and what I do, and I feel very grateful for it. And I remember days going into the studio and feeling very, very grateful for having a space, having people there, having the health that's necessary to teach. And sometimes, my students would ask me, "Are you okay today?" Like, it wasn't that I was upset. It was actually that I felt really grateful. And so this might not be that, but I want us to be grateful for what we have. We may not have this in the future. Who knows? We might be separated. Technology might not be here. So let's just be grateful for whatever it is that we have when we have it. There's so much to be grateful for. And even though we might be remembering days in the past when we were practicing live, maybe if we get to do that again, we'll feel more gratitude. It'll be easier to experience gratitude when we're there in a class, in a studio together, practicing together. So until then, again, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to hear some of my Dharma talks about that kind of stuff, check out my Patreon page. Also, if you want to do this practice again, it will be there. And again, I know many of you are already members there. I hope to see you next week. I hope these times work for you. They definitely work better for me, given the whole pandemic and stuff. So hopefully they work for you. But if not, let us know, and we will try and adjust as necessary. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your practice. You're welcome, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your practice. Thanks, Meredith. AK, awesome. Thank you. Sammy, thanks. I hope to see you guys next week. All right. Thanks, Lindley. Ariella, thank you. Kenneth, appreciate it. Mariana, great to see you all. Thanks so much. Thanks you, Mia. Thank you.